Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Write Pack. Welcome back to Write Pack Radio. This is your host and the show's producer, David Allen Lucas. At this time, we normally pass around the microphone, have people introduce themselves, and then we will jump into a topic regarding writing or publication or even something fun and geeky only that deals with writing. But for the next 3 episodes, as we wind down our first season of Write Pack Radio, we are instead going to do something else. We're going to pass around the microphone, and we're going to give you an in-depth look at all the members of the Write Pack, or at least a huge majority of them, who they are, what they've learned on their journey so far, and what they've done to overcome any complications or failures, pitfalls, and even those pitfalls of success. The Write Pack began first as a group of writers getting together on a weekly write-in, dedicating some time, either in a coffee shop or elsewhere, to writing. And we would hold conversations, helping each other out, answering questions about what we were doing, or passing on information about the writing industry to each other. One day, I sat back listening to our conversations and said, why are we just sharing this with ourselves? Why not pass the word? Why not share it with other people? And that basically began the Write Pack, as you know it, and the birth of Write Pack Radio. So at this time, I am going to turn the microphone over to our interviews. In today's episode, part 1 of the Write Pack, we're going to talk to Fedora Amis, mystery writer and mysterious woman. We're going to talk to Kathleen Kayembe, my beautiful co-host, and we are going to talk to Peter Green, biographer and mystery writer. So tune in, stay tuned, don't disappear. And now let's have a conversation with Kathleen Kayembe, my favorite co-host, my only co-host actually. She keeps me on track. So with that, let me first off start off with Kathleen. You've got a pen name that basically blows my mind when I try to spell it out. And that's really not so much because you picked a strange spelling pen name. It's just I can't spell. So how do you spell your pen name?
Well, both names are Congolese, so
okay.
That's African. So I'm not surprised that it is more difficult for you to spell, because I think that's true for most people.
Yeah.
You spell it Kaseka, that's Kaseka, and then Nvita is Nvita.
Okay, now you've got me curious. Why did you choose a Congolese name?
That's funny, you should ask. I'm half Congolese.
Yay!
So, I was wavering between a few different pen names because I knew I wanted to write under one. And I especially wanted to write under one due to my parents' jobs, which would not go as well if I published erotica under that name. So I was trying to decide between a more American name and that one just sounded better to me.
Okay.
And it also seemed like something nobody else would have.
I was going to say, it's definitely unique. You know, you would think my name would be safe. I mean, it's common, but you would think it would be safe. No, some comedian has his pen name. I'm like, huh?
How dare you, sir?
Yeah, I know.
How dare you?
Really? So that's why I even use my middle name.
I never knew that.
So, who is Kaseka Nvita?
Kaseka?
Kaseka?
Kaseka.
Kaseka?
Nvita.
Thank you. Kaseka Nvita.
She is a paranormal romance and urban fantasy writer whose writer behind the pen name likes to dabble in all sorts of things.
Okay. Boy, that leaves a lot open.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Figure for an interview that's helpful. You're like, no.
I'm not touching this one with a 10-foot prying iron. So, when you started getting published, what were some of your greatest problems getting published?
Well, some of my biggest problems getting published were not so much the publication process itself. It was the internal process that happened afterwards. Suddenly, writing, which had been very much something that I did for fun, play, started a lot in fan fiction, so there was no chance of publication. So things kind of had a lower level of pressure for me as a writer. Suddenly, I had things that were published, and I thought, is writing just playing anymore? Like, is it just for fun now, or does some of it have to be a job? Does some of it have to be work that I have to do? And do I only have to write things that are that have publication potential now? And that was really hard for me, and it's still something that's really hard for me because I like my writing to be something that I do as play. It helps free up my imagination and free up my internal censor from wanting to be like, no, you can't write that, that's not good, or you can't write that, that's not publication worthy, stuff like that. Those are things that are all internal that happened after publication, but they're not things with the publication process itself. That was fine.
So that part, so it was really more your internal challenges or your personal challenges past that.
I gave myself a hard time.
Now, you never.
I am not my own worst critic. Never was, never will be.
So why do you write what you write?
Because it's fun. Because I like reading it. I guess I started reading gay romance and fan fiction, and I wanted to read more of that outside of fan fiction, and I had a bunch of friends on the interwebs who all were writing that sort of thing, and it gave me a lot of joy to be able to join in that and write characters who I didn't see on the bookshelves. And as for fantasy, I grew up loving fairy tales. I still love them. Anything with magic in it gives me joy. So magic in the real world is just beyond wonderful to me.
At the risk of sounding like a complete noob in this, how do you break out the differences between gay romance and, say, a romance that's fantasy based, but I could have bought from Harlequin, just as an example? I mean, your straight romance.
Well, I'm confused about the question.
Okay. Is there what differentiates gay romance from straight romance outside of the obvious, which is you've got two people of the same sex?
I think that's part of the draw for me, though, because something that I don't see in straight romance as much is the internal struggle of the characters about their relationship and about their place in society, if they should pursue it. And there is a certain amount of stigma attached to gay relationships in stories, and to some extent in real life, not as bad as it was, but when you have two characters who are not just worried about their love for one another, but also their place in the society that they're in, and also whether the love that they feel is making them less of a socially acceptable person as far as like manhood and blah, that adds layers that I don't think the straight romance necessarily has. And also, I like the idea of versatility. I like the idea of versatility in the bedroom and in relationship roles outside of it. And I don't think there's as much of that in straight romance that I've come across.
Okay. With all of the issues of writing and all the pains of writing, I guess I really should say, like the trouble of trying to get published, which you yourself didn't have, the critics, the internal critic of, oh, this is not good enough, this is, call it what you will. Since we are PG-13, I guess I could say...
This is drivel. Your poetry is doggerel.
Yes. with all the contracts that might become involved, the pressures of contracts, why be a writer? And what keeps you going?
Well, that's been harder since I got published, actually. But why be a writer? Because I love it. I'm more myself when I've written for the day. I get to be part of the world and not just kind of observing it. I feel like that sounds cold, but there's a part of me that's not as present unless I put something down on the page and gotten the outlet for all the voices in my head down on something. So why be a writer? It makes me sane. It helps me think. It gives me joy. It's just fun. And it's not going to go away, that need to put things down. Like, I can be stubborn as much as I want, but it's only going to increase my suffering. So I might as well do what I feel compelled to do anyway.
So you kind of hinted at this next question, at the answer to the next question, but I'm going to try and focus you down a little bit more.
Oh, focus. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Let's try that.
I know. I love you over here, but yeah, I know how you are. What, so far, has been your greatest problem with success? And most importantly, how are you moving past that?
My greatest problem with success is myself. My own expectations for myself, I think, are the greatest problem I have with success. Because I'm much better, I think, than some people at not looking at reviews, not looking at ratings that people have given my stuff. I know that's a bad path to go down for myself, so I just don't. But I'm my own worst enemy as far as many things are concerned. So how I've been getting around that is learning to accept myself for who I am and then going through the writing process anyway. So accepting, in my case, that it does freak me out when I feel like I have a lot of external pressure on me to do something, even if I love that something. So taking the pressure off by writing just short things, doing prompts, and free writing. Things that feel lower stress to me, but can do something later if I want them to. Just reminding myself that it's for fun. This is playtime.
I'm going to use a term you may not know. No, because to my knowledge, you don't read military sci-fi or military fiction. So if you don't understand it, just holler. I'll quickly explain it.
Oh, I will.
Do you ever find yourself polishing the cannonball?
I do not know what that means.
Perfect. That's why I phrased that. It's a military term that comes from artillery, which is where you are you're pushing the gun to a certain point. Oh, yeah, I think I got it. No, I don't quite have it aimed exactly correctly. So let me adjust it so it's another slight tick to the left. Nope. Now I'm going to adjust it up a tick. Nope, down 2 ticks. And they never fire the damn weapon. Do you ever find yourself in your writing life polishing the cannonball?
Yes. Yes.
How do you stop?
Oh my goodness. Funny you should ask me that now. Because I've been polishing the cannonball on a novel that I need to rewrite the entire way through. And nope, not ready. Nope, I started it, but I'm not sure that was the right place to start. I'm just gonna do some more free writing and think about that a little bit more later. I'll restart it again. It'll be great. Today I don't feel like doing that. I'm gonna do the dishes. All of the dishes from all of the weeks that I have not done dishes. All of them. That's my polishing the cannonball. I start house cleaning. Or playing a game on my phone and then thinking, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Dishes are great. I do find myself polishing the cannonball. And what I've been doing is, again, trying to lower the level of pressure that I put on myself. So doing things like free writing, because I still don't know where I actually need to begin the story. So I kind of understand part of why I haven't officially restarted again. But figuring out where things are going as far as the story that I'm trying to tell, that I've been polishing the cannonball with, and then letting myself just do those things so that the story is more ready to begin.
Okay. Now, I know this next one is like the softest pitch I could ever throw to you as a question.
I'm going to miss.
No, you're not. Who are some of your literary heroes?
Oh, man. Books. I don't read books. Sorry.
Oh, I know you better than that.
Last night, I was up till 5 a.m. reading Mercedes Lackey, okay? It's not my fault. I just couldn't help myself. I might be a little tired today. Mercedes Lackey was a big one, actually, when I was younger. I used to read a lot of her. A giant, probably years-long Mercedes Lackey, quote-unquote, phase. Had another one with Michael Crichton. I still love Jurassic Park very much. But literary heroes, I think Julia Cameron is definitely one. She wrote The Artist's Way. And she's just a great teacher and writer. And she is into so many different things. I think she's a fascinating person. And she's also a good writer, and I love that she's a teacher as well. I also like Natalie Goldberg for a similar reason. She writes books about writing, among other things. Writing Down the Bones is a classic of hers. I love Neil Gaiman just because he's friggin' amazing. What's funny is I don't like his prose writing as much. I loved the Sandman series that he wrote, the comic book series. It's brilliant, and it blew my mind when I read it in high school. But I think as a person, he's just amazing, and I would love to be that kind of writer, that kind of person. Megan Durr, she is my favorite gay romance writer. Shouldn't say gay fantasy because she's written a lot. Megan Durr is also with Less Than 3 Press, and I love her fairy tales a lot. She rewrites fairy tales and all sorts of other things which give me joy. Patricia Briggs too. I like her. And a bunch of people. I'll just stop now, though. I probably should. Just I'll go through a laundry list with you and tell you what you should read from everybody. It's not going to help.
I'm sure there's probably one of our listeners at least who's sitting there writing down all these names.
Man, then I should probably add Pat Schneider. Thank you for the reminder. Pat Schneider is amazing. She wrote a book called Writing Alone and with Others. And if you ever want to get over being freaked out about writing or just letting yourself write, that is the book for you. It tells you how to write alone, and it tells you how to write with a group of people. And it has the Amherst Writers and Authors Association method of writing workshopping in it. And that writing workshop is the safest thing I've ever seen for writers to be in. They're brilliant rules. I think everyone should have them.
Well, in that case, this next question may be redundant based on the way you just answered the end of that last one.
I'll call the redundancy department of redundancy, okay?
Isn't that kind of redundant?
I don't know. Should we call the department on that too?
Why not? It's redundancy. What advice do you have, or what advice would you give to beginning writers or writers who are just looking to pitch out their career and go try to be something a little less challenging, like bomb disposal?
Well, bomb disposal is certainly interesting, but I think after a certain point you're going to want to be writing again, because bomb disposal is certainly interesting, and you now know something, a lot of some things about a very interesting topic that will be great for a story or nonfiction. So, I guess if you're wanting to toss your writing away, or if you're wanting to begin writing, I'd say begin and don't toss. Writing can be hard, just like any skill is when you first pick it up. But don't let that discourage you. Just write in the voice that feels most natural to you. Write the things that interest you, and know that if you ever decide to try and go the publication route, that's fine. And there will be difficult things that you run into, but that's the same as with anything else in your life. You just have to stick it out, and eventually you will triumph and come home in victory and flowers. Or maybe not a parade, but it's better. You will feel better about yourself and your life if you try. And nobody ever has to see anything, but you will know that you've done something amazing, and you will feel that, and you will be glad you did.
Thanks, Kathleen. Okay, now we're going to talk with Fedora Amis. Fedora, first off, who is Fedora Amis?
Fedora Amis? Well, it's
Amis.
a name that I
always
put
mispronounce
together.
it.
Yes, it's a name that I put together, and I'll just talk about one part of it. And that part is fedora, because I'm wearing one right now. You wear one all the time. Fedoras are fabulous.
Yes, they are.
Well, fedora is a hat that most people associate with fellas. But that's wrong. Did you know that's wrong?
Actually, I did.
Okay.
But I bet most people out in the world didn't.
Okay.
That's because I listen to and read and watch a lot of noir from 1940s and 30s and 50s. You know, the time in which everybody wore a hat.
Well, fedora came from a play in the late 19th century. And an opera also was after the play. And the great star of the play, the non-operatic version, was the divine Madame Sarah Bernhardt. And it was a costumier who created for her a chapeau that she wore in the play, which looks like the modern fedora. It had a few more furbelows. It has some plumes in it, but other than that, it was exactly the shape of the fedora. And that poor person's name I do not know, but she's the one that popularized it. And do you know what? It was Edward VII, the one who abdicated as being King of England, who popularized it and stole it from men, and I'm taking it back.
Well, go for it. So you hear it first, people. Indiana Jones was not the one who popularized it for men, nor, of course, was it Humphrey Bogart or any of those back then. Though, hey, he looked good in a fedora.
Royalty.
Yep. Leave it to them. Let me take you to writing. When did you decide you wanted to be a writer?
Well, you know, I think I always wanted to be a writer, and I always wanted to write fiction. And in fact, I started to write when I was in college, and I wore the most awful dreck you can't possibly imagine. It was so self-serving and so boring that I would write a page and tear it up. So I understand about all those people who do that kind of thing. It took me some miles and years before I figured out how to do it and actually make it worth even me reading.
Understood. And just for the listeners' sake, obviously, like all our recordings, we're recording weeks in the past. I saw on Facebook today, posted from is it Independent? Anyways, one of the British newspapers that posted that most writers don't even break in until they're middle-aged. So, which is kind of interesting. I don't know about you when you were graduating from college. I know with me, my goal was immediately, let's go make this thing my career in my life. Yeah, that didn't exactly happen financially.
Not unless you want to have a full-time day job, too. And I know a lot of writers who have a full-time day job. And you're one of them,
I'm
of course.
one. I'm right here. Yeah.
And they also find several hours a day to write. Because I don't think it's really that you choose to write and think you're going to go out and make a big fortune. Rather, it's writing sort of chooses you, and it just nags at you. And those characters run around in your head, and you either become insane or you start writing them down eventually. But it does not have to be the first week you get out of college.
Okay,
in fact, I'd sort of warn against that.
Okay. You're like me in the fact you write mysteries. In fact, mysteries explore, I think, probably the darkest side of humanity.
Certainly they can.
So why write mysteries? Why study that dark side of humanity? I mean, versus, say, writing cute books like Warship Down about little bunnies that go through their life, or, you know, something like that. Why your focus?
Well, understand that my focus isn't dark mystery or thriller particularly. It's more the lighter side of olden times that I go for. What I want to do, in part at least, is to help people understand what life would have been like, what real, honest-to-goodness, popular culture influenced life would have been like more than 100 years ago, right here in St. Louis. So that is what I'm going for. I'm not really going for the dark side. But as to mystery, I would say that every book, every television show, every anything that's worth having other people read has some mystery to it. Unless it's just purely educational. And even that, it's better if it has some mystery to it. Because, after all, we wonder about things. We're human beings. And the things we don't understand are wonderful, exciting, hard to grasp, and it's what makes life worth living.
Excellent. So with all the pains in writing, like getting published, first off, that's one of the hardest things to do sometimes. Selling, if you actually get book contract, meeting the next contract's requirements, critics, all those, why be a writer?
Well, as I said before, I don't think you choose writing so much as it chooses you. And so you write, and you write through the criticisms, and you write through the bad days when everything on the page just looks stupid, and you keep on writing. When your critique partner says, "Oh, this should start not now, but about a half a week from now," after you, and asking you to dump the first 50 pages that you've already written. Or when your editor says, well, I like everything but, and there's always a big long list of buts that they don't like. What sustains you is the fact that you love to write. You have something you want to say, and by golly, you're going to say it no matter what.
Agreed. I posted on Right Back Radio's website, or Facebook page some time ago, a commencement speech by Neil Gaiman. And he talks about create good art. And he jokingly laughs and he says it in jokingly the same way you just did, which is, your husband runs away with a politician, make good art. Your leg gets crushed and eaten by a boa constrictor, make good art. IRS on your trail, make good art. That's really what it is. You're out there, you're making good art. That's what keeps us all sane, I think, as you said earlier. Absolutely.
As Isaac Asimov said, when he was asked what he would do if he had only a couple of months to live, he said he'd write faster.
Yep. What so far has been your greatest obstacle in publishing or in writing, and how did you overcome it?
My greatest obstacle, I would say, is that I'm interested in a whole bunch of things, and they tend to distract me. I can get so involved in doing research that that's all I get done. And that, I would say, is my biggest obstacle, really, because everything else, the fact is, if you work at it hard enough and long enough and get savvy enough to learn the business, you'll eventually knock on the right door.
Yeah, there's no such thing as an overnight success, that's for sure.
The average, I think, is 10 years.
Yeah. I think you're right.
It's about that.
Okay. What, so far, has been your greatest problem with any success you've had? I mean, we're always prepared. You read all the articles about be prepared for the problems of failure. No one warns us about problems of success.
Well, Dave, I haven't been blessed with any of those problems of success just yet. I'll get back to you on that in a couple of years, maybe.
Alrighty. Who are some of your literary heroes?
Oh, top of the list, unquestionably, Mark Twain. Brilliant writer, and so down to earth and so homey that you love his stories on several levels. You can read them as just a plain old fun yarn, or you can read them as social commentary. You can read them on an entire exposition of the human soul from the beginning of time. I don't think I can possibly achieve anything like that, but I'd like to try.
Amen. And one last question for you. What advice do you have for other writers?
For writers, I would say, don't worry, be happy. Don't worry about what the critics are going to say, or how much work it's going to be, or how long it's going to take. Write the book of your heart, the book that you want to read that isn't out there. You'll find your way.
And with that, thank you, Fedora.
Hello. We're here with Peter Green today to interview for Right Back Radio. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Kathleen. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for coming to speak with us on Right Back Radio episodes. So, David and I are going to be interviewing Peter, and one of the first questions we've been asking is, who are you? Who are you as a writer? Who is Peter Green?
Well, you have to understand, when I was a pre-adolescent, my parents knew a lot of writers. They were both journalists. And they'd come to our house, and I'd say, gee, maybe I want to be a writer, because, you always want to be what your parents are for a while anyway. And they'd all say, oh, you don't want to be a writer. There are too many writers around. They don't make any money. It's a terrible life. So I studiously avoided that for about 50 years.
Oh my gosh.
Plus, my parents said, it's really, you really need to go learn a profession or something because you've got to earn a living in this life.
Not discouraging.
So I became an architect. And sooner or later, that led to my writing ability because because it led to all kinds of opportunities to write, promote what we were doing, describe our buildings, all kinds of things, and marketing. So it wasn't wasted. Actually, that resulted in millions of words coming off the page and off the computer screen over the years.
Oh, wow. So you were discouraged from writing as a child, but then came into it through the trade, through architecture.
That's right.
That's really funny. Oh, my goodness. So what genres do you write?
Well, I'm basically in biography and crime fiction, mystery and suspense. And you may want to follow up with, how did you choose those two?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
a little bit.
So the biography was handed to me. My mother saved some 400 letters from my dad from World War II. And she handed me this cardboard carton and said, I want you to have these. I saved them. And maybe you'll know what to do with these someday. And so she had saved them in their original postmarked envelopes, which turned out to be incredibly valuable in case anybody is saving biographical letters. So that's important because you can date them and tie them into history. The other, my mother was always reading murder mysteries. My dad loved to figure out murder mysteries. We'd be in adjoining hotel rooms and he would say, gee, you could commit a murder, go through the connecting doors, and if you did it right, you'd never be detected. He was always figuring stuff like that out. And we loved clever plots like Roald Dahl's Lamb to the Slaughter, famous short story.
I haven't read that one.
Oh, it's funny. You'll laugh, silly. But anyway, so that's how I got into my two genres. And in architecture, where unknown public servants are handling huge amounts of money without much oversight or supervision, there's room for all kinds of mischief and skullduggery. And I ran into a few of those in my career, and I said, gee, there's some great stories I could tell about this. Disguising the guilty, of course.
So what actually started you writing fiction? Because biography is nonfiction, and then mystery is very much fiction, generally, in the kind that you're writing. So when did that start?
Well, okay. At my 40th college reunion, all of us were about 60, 61. One of our braver classmates got up and said, "What are you going to do with the last 1/3 of your life?" And I said, "Holy cow." We were all looking ahead at maybe 20, 30 years of productive life where we may have conquered most of our economic challenges, and maybe we'd have some extra leisure to devote to some new career. One of my classmates wanted to be a pilot, and everybody said, "Well, you're crazy. You finally don't have a worry in the world, and you're going to go off and get yourself killed." And he said, "Yeah, but now I don't have anybody that I have to stay alive for, and I can do what I've always dreamed of doing." And I thought, wow, maybe that's what I can do. My responsibilities are lighter. Maybe I can really do my dream. My parents both said I ought to be a writer. And as far as getting into the fiction side of it, once started, I had my biography. I didn't have nearly the material that I had for any other biographies or nonfiction. And the limits of nonfiction, you have to be accurate, you have to research, you have to do all this, and it somewhat limits your imagination. So I just said, why not try fiction? Plus, it's probably fewer lawsuits.
Yeah, definitely that. Let me ask you a question. It's one I asked Fedora. With mystery, even despite the fun of it and the figuring out the plots and so forth, you are walking on the dark side of humanity.
Yes.
What draws you to that dark side? Why choose that dark side?
We, as T.W. Fendley said in Zero Time, we must embrace the darkness because it is part of ourselves. And I think it's part of everybody's personality. Haven't you secretly wanted to kill somebody? Haven't you?
In the last 5 minutes? Or no, I'm just joking.
Well, maybe.
I'm just
It's a
joking.
good time I had no powers as a teenager.
Haven't you thought up a crime or a secret thing you really wanted to do? You didn't dare do it because we're all pretty tame. We're all socialized and, we have to earn a living. We have to get along with other people. We have to please the boss. I mean, this is kind of a boring life when you come right down to it. You can't do. So here I need to think up a character who was taller, who was smarter, and who was a heck of a lot braver than I was, and I came up with Patrick McKenna, my mystery hero.
Sounds like there's a certain amount of wish fulfillment going on.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my goodness, that is funny. Trying to put away the murder thoughts from when I was younger. There are family members who would so be dead by now.
I sit back, I think of certain plots, and it's a darn good thing I'm on this side of the law. Because if I wasn't, I could be a master criminal.
Exactly.
And actually, a friend of mine described that, and I think you were there for that.
So, you got into writing later, you said, in life, even though it sounds like your parents discouraged you, but then thought you should be a writer anyway.
My dad was dying, and he said, "Gee, Pete, I always thought you wanted to be a writer." This was like one of the last conversations I ever had with him.
Oh, wow.
And it's sad to think of it. But I said, "Well, gee, Dad, I do all kinds of writing in my architecture work. I do all this promotion and all these descriptions of our projects." And yeah, he said, but the question stuck. And I guess my mother always wanted to be a writer, but she never dared. She always said my dad took all the poetry out of her.
Oh.
Which, in just when women were starting to come out on their own during World War II, men could kind of really discourage women. And so that was really what started that with me.
Was having your architecture career before becoming a writer helpful in your writing journey? Because we have talked before this conversation about the pains of being a writer, things like rejection, things like discipline, and I'm wondering if your career before that has helped you to deal with those things more easily.
Absolutely. For one thing, it taught me how to sit down and work and get something done. I started every morning at 8 o'clock, just like I did in my working years. I work till I'm hungry at lunchtime, and then in the afternoon I usually do all the necessary stuff, pay the bills, run the errands, help with the shopping, whatever. And in the evening I read. That's the Stephen King method. So I find out how to do things well, like Stephen King does them and some of my favorite authors do.
Who are some of your favorite authors, now that you brought up Stephen King and favorite authors?
Yeah, well, I like him, but even better, some of the reading I did, I was a reluctant reader, but my mother kept throwing books at me all my life, and I read a good portion of them. And I like Hemingway's short stories and a couple of his novels. James Michener, I always got into James Michener because he's such a storyteller and he ties history together through the generations, and I love that, the sweep of his work. Ken Follett, incredible. The Eye of the Needle was the first thing I ever read of his, and when I saw the movie I said, I've already seen this movie. But no, I just read the fabulous, lifelike, immediate, gripping descriptions in the prose book. And folks like Tim O'Brien, wonderful war stories. John Steinbeck, some contemporaries like Rick Squiat, one of our St. Louis authors, who's very accomplished. And he's kind of a personal hero for me because he helped train me.
I did not know that. How did he help train you?
Well, I took a class of his in fiction at where you and I met, Kathleen, at the Washington U Creative Writing Institute.
It's Summer Writers Institute. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That must have been the class that I wasn't in with you. Was that your second one?
Yeah, we were together in nonfiction, right?
Mm-hmm. And in fiction.
Oh, in fiction.
It was beginning fiction.
Yes, yes.
Oh my goodness. So that's who you saw afterwards.
Yeah.
What's been your biggest obstacle getting published?
Getting published. Well, I think the hardest part is the delays. In business, you want to do an advertising or promotional campaign, you want to go after a project, you work like heck on it for 6 weeks, and then you let it fly because it has a deadline, and you do it. This business of working like crazy for a year or two on a book, and then just stopping dead on the thing and waiting to see if you can get somebody else to notice it or like it or even answer your contact email or letter, I mean, is just driving me up the wall. I mean, it's just terrible.
Well, that does sound terrible. So my next question then is, what keeps you writing despite that?
Well, the fact is, I did connect on my first 2 books with small independent presses that did a very nice job and were very nice to work with. And then when one of them stopped performing for me, I said, well, they haven't helped me sell any books in the last 8 years, so I think I'll just take that book back. I had exceeded the time limit on my agreement, so I took the rights back and published it myself, Ben's War with the U.S. Marines. And then the second one, sadly, the publisher, who we were getting along great, but Linda Houle, publisher of L&L Dreamspell, died in mid-2013. And so about 100 authors suddenly were on their own, and many of them went to small presses. I debated for a long time, and I ended up deciding to go ahead and self-publish it. Crimes of Design is out again on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and other places. So, and that took a lot of the frustration out of it, because all of a sudden you think, well, if nobody wants this thing, I've got a way of getting it out to the world.
So what would you advise writers to do who are going through rough patches with their writing, or facing setbacks, or even afraid of their own success and potential?
Well, one thing that I even learned as an architect in a small firm, you've got to keep promoting all the time, even while you're creating and producing. Because, okay, you write a book, and all of a sudden, if you haven't been promoting all this time during part of your time, then you haven't sold anything and you haven't accomplished anything. So, you're especially in business, if you depend on your regular income, if you haven't been promoting, you finish a job and you've got nothing to do for the next 6 months. So, same lesson in business as in writing. It is a business, and you've got to keep promoting all the time.
Thank you, Peter. It was really fun talking to you.
Well, thank you, Kathleen and David. It's always a pleasure.
Well, this has been Peter Green from Right Back Radio. Hope you've enjoyed getting to know him.
Tune in next week as we talk to Jennifer Stolzer, Matt McGraw, and Melanie Colaney, 3 more members of the Right Pack. Thank you for listening. The Right Pack would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their bookstore. STL Books and Gifts is St. Louis's newest independent bookstore with an emphasis on fine literature for adults and children, and the most comprehensive selection of St. Louis books available anywhere. Visit them online at stlbooks.com or in person at 100 West Jefferson Avenue, Kirkwood, Missouri 63122. Tune in next week as the Right Pack will conquer yet another pondering issue in the writing industry. Theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.